Welcome to Braga, everyone. We are coming to you from Rafael's studio here in Braga to talk about the city, to talk about being an expat in Portugal, and anything else that might come up. So I'm just going to jump right in and ask you, what's the best thing about living in Braga?
Oh, that's a tough one because honestly, there are so many wonderful things about living here. But probably my absolute favorite thing is that it feels like living in a city in some aspects, but at the same time, like living in a town.
Okay.
I'll explain that a little bit better.
Mhm.
Like here, you have accessibility to, I don't know how many, like four malls. I mean, malls are dying in the States, but here they're practically thriving still. I mean, especially Braga Park. That one, especially if you go there on a Friday, Saturday, packed. Even
Busy.
I've met so many people who've complained like, oh, it's too busy there. I'm going to go to Nova Arcada instead of da. But you have, if you need to get something, you can get it. If you want to go out and enjoy an event, if you want to go to a cafe, if you want to go to a restaurant, you have plenty of options. But at the same time, it feels like a small town because you will also see some of the same faces when you're
Okay.
walking around. You'll
Okay.
see the same people. You'll see some of the same things. And people will start to recognize you. You'll start to recognize them. And you'll have those small town connections like you would rather than like, all right, we're on big giant metropolitan city. I don't know. You don't know me. We don't need to know each other. Let's just get through this interaction.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And you've been in Braga for a couple years now?
A year and 7-ish months, more or less. Yeah.
Okay. So what's changed in the past year, 7-ish months?
Cost of living.
Oh, really? It's gone up.
Yeah. Well, so look, the world in general, things have gone up, but the rents in Braga have just skyrocketed. They were already starting to go up like right before I got here, but the amount that's actually available here for rent, minimal. And then the prices that they're asking are absurd. But one thing that also a lot of people don't realize when they're renting in Portugal is that sometimes the price that you will see online is the asking price. People don't realize that you can negotiate on rentals here.
Yeah.
So that's one thing to keep in mind. But as time goes on, like maybe what we've seen in Lisbon and Porto, those numbers are going to become less and less negotiable.
Okay. And what would be some advice you'd give to someone if they're looking to move to Braga and live here? Like how can they find a place if there's
Lots
not
of
much?
luck.
Lots of luck.
Lots
Okay.
of luck.
They're in high demand and they go quickly?
Very. That's the thing. If you see a place that you like, don't sleep on it. I mean, especially because the processes here can take a lot longer than what people might be used to in like the States, for example, where you can like sign on the dotted line right there.
Uh-huh.
But here you have to have a little bit of back and forth sometimes. And then also, even when it comes to the contract, you may want to negotiate some aspects of your contract. There are those things that are open that people are like, what? You can do that on a rental
Yeah.
here? But yeah, it's worthwhile having a look over some of those things because sometimes you'll find contracts, even in the original contract for some of the apartments that I was looking at, I passed on them because they had really, really shady things that are actually illegal on Portuguese law. So keep an eye open, definitely.
Yeah. And you think someone can navigate that contract themselves or they should get a lawyer?
I don't necessarily think you need a lawyer, but having someone who's familiar with the language and also familiar with the real estate market. So either a really well educated real estate agent or an agent who is part of a network or part of a real estate agency that has lawyers on their team. Like, for example, even with this apartment, there was an agency that was representing the owner, and then there was an agency that was helping me.
Okay.
The agency that was helping me had a legal team there, and so their legal team looked at the contract to make sure it was legal from there, and they noted a couple of things that they recommended to be changed. So
Okay.
that's one thing that you can find. There are a lot of individual real estate agents that work on their own, and that's definitely doable. But having somebody there who understands, who can fight on your side, my opinion, priceless, because there are so many times where I would say also the caveat to that is don't pay extra for that. Because now, unfortunately, you're finding a lot of agents who are asking for a premium before they'll even talk to you. They'll
Okay.
ask you for a consulting fee or for like, they're only going to be willing to work with you if you're looking for rentals above X amount per month. There's some odd things that I've been noticing more recently like
Okay.
that.
So don't pay for that. Like there are still others out there that
This
won't
is
be
what I
like
call
that.
the expat tax. When it's important to know what is the norm in the country that you're going to and what is completely outside of that. Yeah, so there are people who do take a look at how things are done, and sometimes they modify the rules when necessary. But sometimes it's done in a positive way. But unfortunately, there are also times when it's done in a negative way to not necessarily be the most upfront and honest, unfortunately.
Right. Have you noticed any other expat taxes besides real estate stuff?
In Braga, not so much. Thankfully, at this point in time, there's not a lot of that. But every once in a while, there'll be a service or like an accountant or a service provider. That's more the area where I see the expat tax come up. Or sometimes when you see for skilled workers or things like that, if they see you're from X, Y, or Z country, that maybe they might think they can boost the price a little bit. I've seen that happen, and I've talked to friends who are trying to work with tradesmen and stuff, and they start talking about the price. I'm like, yeah, you need to negotiate that. That's they're giving you the gringo price.
Okay, okay. What about tipping? It made me think of that. Like, do servers expect expats or even locals actually to tip here in Braga, or what's the culture like in Braga for tipping?
That I don't have the best sense on, because I actually don't tip like an American. I've been abroad for like more than 14 years. And so my sense of tipping is very different than the average American coming out here.
Uh-huh.
But I would say, generally speaking, when I'm with Americans and they're tipping here, they tip too much.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually can create a whole landslide of problems where people expect, even for the locals, it makes it more difficult for them to go out eventually like, oh, well, you didn't give us X, Y, or Z. So I'd say maybe like, if you're spending like under 20, like round up to the next euro and maybe throw another euro on top of that. But that's already like in some restaurants, like, whoa.
Yeah.
But if it's above 50, like a couple euros, it's like, I personally don't see anything wrong with that. But I do know Portuguese people who are like, yeah, no, please don't.
Yeah.
Please, that actually hurts us.
Mm-hmm. So you should think never to go above 10%, really, right?
Even that, depending on what you're spending, can be a bit much.
And that's high, yeah. I think that's a difficult mindset for Americans because we're so used to tipping. So then, especially because we've been abroad for a long time as well, so we have a different thought on it. Yeah. But if you're moving from the U.S. Over here to Portugal, you gotta have a shift so that you don't mess up the
tipping culture in America. I think I mean, it's a very unpopular opinion, but I think it's very unhealthy. It's really unfortunate. It's like, why is it my problem that your boss is not paying you enough? Like, that as the customer should, in my personal opinion, again, this is not, as somebody who's been abroad for a while and has a little bit of a different mindset when it comes to this, if I have to pay extra, include it in the price of the plate.
Definitely. Okay, so back to the cost of living, because we're talking about, you said that it's gone up. So real estate's gone up. Have you noticed anything else that's gone up here in Braga?
So when I first arrived, like, for example, Portuguese staple, can of sardines. There was one brand that I remember seeing at the supermarket, and it was something like, when I arrived, maybe 70 cents, 80 cents. And then middle of last year, end of last year, it was maybe 150.
Oh, okay. That's a big jump.
Yeah. I think now things are starting to come down a little bit, at least level off. But with inflation and different things going on in the world, we don't need to get into details. Of course, the cost of living, especially in Europe, is being affected, not just in Portugal, but across the board.
Yeah. And have you noticed a lot more expats moving here? Is Braga becoming more popular with expats?
Yes and no. I would say, for example, there's one Facebook group here that every week the admin adds, like, I want to say another 30, 40 people, sometimes a couple times in a week. There's like a ton of people that are joining. But while the monthly expat meetup in Braga has grown significantly since I've been here, also you have to take into account the health emergency and all those factors about who's actually wanting to go out, who's able to go out, and who's actually here, that the numbers have grown. The visible numbers have grown. Amount of people actually moving here at the end of the day, like, because how many people are joining a Facebook group and actually going to do that? Yeah. So that's the tougher part to see. Definitely there are people coming here, though. But I would say that it's actually the bigger community in Braga is the Brazilian community, not the American community. Okay.
So you've seen an uptick of Brazilians moving here? It's just always big?
Well, in the past few years in general. I mean, like, Braga has come to have the nickname Bragazil because it's got like the largest concentration of Brazilians in the whole country.
Okay.
And so for me, as someone who's actually part Brazilian, I love it because, like, I can go have coxinha, I can go have pão de queijo, I can go have all my foods that I absolutely love and I would say are borderline necessary in life.
And staple.
Yeah. I mean, personally, I think like a lot of Brazilian people are absolutely wonderful, super friendly, kind, vibrant people. But I might make that as part of the argument towards cost of living rather than Americans. However, and this is something I've been meaning to go into on my channel, is that I might say that even though there are more Brazilians that come here, it's more Americans who are purchasing the higher end ticket properties that are maybe bringing up some of the costs. I don't have the numbers, but that's from what I've seen, kind of the gut feeling that I've gotten from the what I've seen so far.
Okay. Why do you think Brazilians are choosing Braga?
Brazilians will go anywhere where there's another Brazilian.
Okay,
There's just it's a concentration thing. Brazilians are very communal people, and there's something about having that support structure around you. So I would say maybe that's part of the reason why. I know that a lot of the Brazilians who do have Portuguese ancestry, they come from the north. I don't think it has anything to do with like, oh, my great whatever came from Braga. I mean, like some of my ancestry, as far as I can tell, is actually from Porto and some other areas around there, but I don't have a good sense, other than maybe there was one Brazilian guy who came here, was like, he told his friend, and then the friend told
and
him,
it snowballed. Yeah,
that would be my educated guess.
Okay, so earlier I asked you the best thing about living in Braga. What's the worst thing about living here?
That's a tough one, because all in all, there's not that many negative things here. If you're somebody, because I don't drive, but if you're somebody who drives, traffic here can be a little bit annoying, but it's not like being like sitting in LA traffic where you have like 3 hours to get home. Here, big traffic, it's an extra 10 minutes, 15 minutes, maybe 20. But they're going to be doing some renovations on one of the tunnels here, because there's, in a lot of the city, the center, there are tunnels that go under the city rather than above or through the main streets. But that's something that I would think is going to make some big problems over the next year or so.
Yeah, the construction, closing roads and stuff.
Mainly the tunnels. It's because those are big here.
Yeah.
That's really the only thing. Or if you're someone who has allergies, then it's a very green part of the country. Even though it's a city, we're surrounded by countryside, and you don't have to go very far to get into even farmland and from here. So that's one thing I might keep an eye on if you are somebody who suffers from seasonal allergies, is that they can be pretty intense here. And so right now it's the end of June, and the pollen count is only now kind of like finally starting to drop off. So that would be something I would say to keep in mind. I mean, of course, if you're taking allergy pills or whatever, but
which you can get here. So, so as long as you're okay.
Over-the-counter stuff is very accessible here, and there's various different options. Some of the things you might see in the U.S. just under a different name. It's the same chemical on the inside, but
yeah. So earlier you were talking about traffic, but you say you don't have a car. So is it very doable to live in Braga without a car?
My opinion, yes. I mean, it depends partially on what part of Braga you're living in. If you're living outside of the city, then I would say you might want to have a car. But if you're living in any of the, even not necessarily just central areas, like just periphery of the center and a little bit further than that, I would say even though it can be a little bit on the hilly side, it's still walkable here. I don't have an interest in purchasing a car. I don't have a license. I don't necessarily even need one with my lifestyle. And one thing that I've seen here also is that, like, having just to get around, say with Ubers, for example, the cost, like the minimum fee is maybe, it fluctuates, but say maybe around $320, $380, depends on time of day. But I've never had a trip here, like the most ridiculous cost that I've ever paid in Braga, and for like say an Uber XL was like maybe 12 euros.
Okay.
And
there are a lot of drivers enough to where you can get a car.
It depends on the part of town, because sometimes depending on how far out from the center you are, you may have a harder time to get one, but there's usually enough-ish. And you have a couple options, like there's Uber, Bolt, and Free Now is a little bit more difficult here, but you have options, generally speaking. When it's a Saturday night or something, then it becomes a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, because they're out rather than driving, right? They don't want to work. Who wants to work?
No, people in the car. Like, because actually with the drivers, that's one of their best times. So they make sure, but you'll have more drivers, but fewer available. Yeah,
that makes sense. Of course, good time to drive. Okay, so you talked about malls. What about those who want to be close to a hospital or clinics? Like, what's the healthcare wise here? Like, are there a lot of doctors? Like,
so I'll admit I actually haven't had a lot of interaction with the healthcare system since living in Portugal. Thank God.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
I'm very grateful for this. Generally speaking, having moved here from Italy, I would say things feel a bit more complicated and convoluted with getting set up with doctors and getting appointments and this and that. Like, for example, when I was living in Italy, my doctor, now it's changed post 2020. But normally you just walk in and then you just wait your turn for an appointment. Here, to figure out an appointment with a doctor, I have an appointment months in advance if I need one. I'm supposed to have one, and it's going to be in months from now. So that's one thing that's been a little bit not, I'm not going to say annoying, but different to adjust to,
Hmm.
at least on the public system. So
Yeah.
that's a big caveat. If you're going on the private system, then it's a different story.
Is there a private hospital here?
I think a couple. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I would say maybe two. But the thing is, even though there are private hospitals here, if it's a serious emergency, they'll tell you to go to the public hospital because they'll be better equipped to deal with it. So that's one thing to also keep in mind. There are doctors here. Getting a doctor, like in a lot of Southern Europe, there's a shortage. So getting assigned a doctor is not necessarily the norm.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. If you're considering being on the public system, and if you have access to the public system, which not everybody would, but theoretically you're supposed to, getting that doctor could be a little bit of a challenge. But getting a doctor on the private system here is not going to be as expensive as like back in the States. So do you have access? Yes. But what kind of access do you need?
Yeah. That's good to know. Okay, you said that you were living in Italy. You talked about Italy before. So you have a little bit of a different route because you have a European passport, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so let's chat about what did you have to do with the European passport just to inform them that you're living here because you moved from Italy here. So what did you have to do? Did you register?
Yeah. So basically, in essence, as an EU national, you have the right to basically just plop down your passport on the counter and say, "I'm here, deal with it." But I hate to put it like that, but it's not actually how it goes. But thankfully, here in Braga, it's really simple. Even the individual who handles a lot of the EU registrations at the city hall, like she answered me at like 9 at night when I was trying to make an appointment. She's like, "Okay, you've got an appointment tomorrow." I was like,
"Tomorrow?"
Hold on, like
that's so quick.
I'm not exact. I know I'm ready. I've got all the documents, but like, can you at least confirm with me what documents you need? She's like, "Well, the thing is, technically, you don't even have to be here for another X amount of days and this and that." I'm like, I'd rather have it taken care of now because also I need to set up my company here and this and that. But she's like, "Okay, fine. You can come next Monday and we'll have your appointment at 7:45 or 8 in the morning." I was like, "Okay, a little early, but I'll take it."
And everyone coming in on a visa is like, "What? I have to wait 3-4 months for me to have this type of appointment with Seth."
Yeah, no, I hear people
fast.
talking about Seth and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that's horrible." I will, depending on various factors, I may have to end up dealing with Seth in what, like 3 years and some odd months to get permanent residency and then apply for citizenship after. But I do have another path to citizenship that potentially might not necessitate going into that. But that's one thing as an EU national. As long as you have a way that you can kind of show, like, you're supposed to be able to support yourself while you're here. Okay. So as long as they will ask you also for the like financial documents to show, like in my case, I just showed bank statements and tax return from Italy because all my financials were from Italy. That helped at the municipal offices, but it hurt at the bank when opening up a personal account here.
Interesting.
But coming here also, again, it was a matter of, I want to say, half an hour and 15 euros.
Yeah, that's so crazy. Again, because those on, coming on visas, it's a really long drawn out process to go through stuff. And then that's, you apply in your home country and then you have to do the in-person appointment here. So that's really
even
difficult.
I have a friend who's the husband of an EU national and he's having to jump through various hoops to even get his residency same fine. Situation as me, but he's having to jump through this hoop and that hoop, and it's like
to do the family reunification, which is really backed up as well. So we've heard about that from our viewers too. That's a tough one. So for those what's really nice you're talking about as an EU citizen, a lot of Americans or a lot of people who aren't part of the EU are coming to Portugal, and the perk is with like the D7 or D8 visa is that you can apply for citizenship after 5 years. Right. So a lot of people are really interested in that. So you would apply for Portuguese citizenship as well, or why would you do that?
I personally would. I'm of the belief that in this world you never know what's going to happen. I'm not necessarily thinking that there's going to be an Italexit, but I, especially considering the taxation systems and how they work currently, where you're not citizenship-based tax, or you're not tax based on citizenship, but you're tax based on residency. There's not really a negative or a downside to it. I mean, okay, if there's a certain country that you're trying to get citizenship from and they have military service and you have to get exemptions for that, then that's a different story. But if we're talking about countries like Italy and Portugal, like, why not? If I have the ability to, I'm not opposed to it. I'm not trying to go for a governmental job where I need any type of security clearance. If I did, then I might think again, because if you do have another citizenship, then that can hold you back. But if you're wanting to have a high security clearance job, then you're probably not living on the other side of the world.
Yeah, that makes sense. So your process was really easy, was really quick. But for those of us who have to go through a visa, we do have a course for you guys. We've got 2 different courses. We've got the one that's for the passive income, the D7. And then we also have the D8, which is the remote work or digital nomad for active income. So for the first 10 people who go to our website and you guys use the code Braga, we'll give you $20 off on that for this Braga video.
What an offer.
I know. So go get that course. It's a DIY course that just guides you through the whole process to get your visa, but expect it to take longer than what
it's not going to be half an hour and 15 euros.
Nope, unfortunately not, but this will guide you through the whole thing to do it yourself. So,
but also for a lot of people, I just have to say it's worthwhile looking into your ancestry, especially if you do have ancestry from Europe, because I mean, people are often really shocked at how it even is possible. It's not going to necessarily be an easy process, but I mean, even I've been speaking to people, like I've met, for some reason, a bunch of people have recently popped up in my life that have Polish ancestry.
Oh, okay.
And so, I mean, Polish is one of the easiest in the European to get through ancestry, along with Italian. Italian is, you have a lot of processes to go through, but people are often very surprised at what options they have available to them. And even it's like, but how do I get this document from 18 so-and-so and blah, 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 blah. It's like, hire someone.
Yeah. Also, definitely a good option as well.
It's worth it. It's definitely, I know some Americans here who even have like Irish citizenship and they've gone through that, or Italian citizenship. And it's a blessing and it opens up a lot of doors.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, let's get back to Braga. So we've talked about the worst things, traffic, the best things, which there are a lot more, things on that list for you. But what do you do, I guess, on a day-to-day basis? What is there to do around town, or what are some top things that you recommend that if people think about moving here that they should, check out?
Well, I think the first time anybody comes to Braga, you have to go to Bom Jesus.
Okay.
Just to get the view, to see the city from above, to take either a taxi or the bus, and the bus is very cheap, to get to the base of the funicular cabin. Ride the funicular up. I'm a little bit of a nerd when it comes to mechanical engineering and transportation, and it's water powered and it's fascinating. I love that factor alone. So taking a ride on there is really wonderful. But then when you get to the top, you can have like a nice little drink or an ice cream or something. And so that's first thing. Otherwise, just walking through the town and just taking in the Braga scene, to sit down in front of the Sé Cathedral. Have a drink there. I mean, I'm talking about drinking here, and I'm not much of a drinker. But there's also places where you can have a bite there. To just enjoy the afternoon. I would say Braga is a great place to slow down. It's not the type of place where you want to go if you are looking to party. Go to the Algarve for that.
Okay.
If you want like big city vibe, then Lisbon, maybe even Porto. But Braga is a good place to kind of take time to chill, have a realistic life, but then also be able to have the ability to have options, because you have like the Teatro Circo here, and they always have musicians coming from all around who are performing there, and then also you have the Altis, Forum, where there's a theater that they have, and they always have like even some really big names that come through there, which I was very surprised about, like Rag and Bone Man. Like I was shocked about that. So that's another thing that you can keep an eye out
And it
for.
sounds like there's a lot of festivals here too, right?
Yeah, I mean, we just finished up with the São João, and we're about to get to Noite Branca coming up soon, and then Easter week is a big thing here, and there's parades nonstop, fireworks nonstop. I mean, even during São João, there was fireworks one night, started 1 a.m, and they went on for like 15-20 minutes. And then the final night of São João, there was also again like at midnight or so, fireworks going off. So yeah, there's always different things happen. And then there's even, again, to bring up the Brazilian community, there's been like Brazilian festivals that happen down at the park at the end of the main Liberty Avenue, Avenida de Liberdade. There's always something. There's always something, it feels like.
Now, what about language? Is it important to know Portuguese here, or can you get by with learning the basics? What servers, do they speak English?
So I'll say again, I'm in a little bit of a different situation than a lot of people coming here, because I already spoke some Portuguese before coming. So most of the time I will communicate in Portuguese.
Okay.
But there have been a few times where I've had people respond to me in English, most people who I know here who are coming here with English only, they do feel as though that they've been missold on the idea of how English-speaking friendly Portugal is for living.
Okay.
If you're in Lisbon, then I think it's a very different thing. Porto, again, a little bit different. But in Braga, in my opinion, you need a little bit more. Also, I think it's polite as a guest in someone else's land. To have a bit of the language. So I would advise definitely trying to get a bit of the language and to learn European Portuguese. And if you are getting a teacher, a private tutor, aim for somebody who is from the north, because the accent here is a little bit different than in other places. They switch out B's for V's sometimes, and they'll even
closer to Spain. Because
a little bit. It's a little bit different than how they do it in Spanish, but there's also some ways that they also use words here that may differ in some ways. I mean, even expletives, that's a very large part of the communication here.
Okay. That's really good advice, though, actually, to get a tutor who has the accent of the place that you're going to live. It's just, it'll be much nicer. So even more so like European Portuguese, of course, but then also from the region.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, because like even from Porto to Braga, there's a difference. Matosinhos to Braga, again, there's a difference, but it'll be closer than somebody from like Lisbon or the Algarve. Definitely. Like if you're already that even to the Alentejo, that accent's already a very different way of speaking. But if you can get someone from the north, it's going to help you immensely.
Okay. And for those who like to travel, how easy is it to get to the airport? Because Braga doesn't have their own airport. You have to go through Porto.
Yeah. Actually, it's quite easy. There's a couple ways that you could go. There's a bus that leaves from the central station. I think 1 hour, 2 an hour. I forget off the top of my head, but that's really easy. And I'm not going to say it's cheap, but it's cost effective. It's maybe €9 one way, €15 two way, something like that. But then also if you're splitting it between a couple of people, considering again, like a taxi or an Uber, I think is worthwhile. There's also private drivers. Even like when I moved here, there was a company that I used because I came here with 10, 12 suitcases. And there was a couple of us who were moving here. So we hired a driver and it was €50 to get all of us. And the same ride when I was in Italy was like 250, 350 euros. Okay. and it's like same distance, same everything, almost all the exact same details. But yeah, no, definitely worthwhile to consider a private ride to the airport. But the public transport, well, it's not actually public, it's a private company, but the bus is worthwhile, I would say, very worthwhile. But
how far is it? Like how long of a drive?
I want to say 40 minutes. I've only had to do it like once or twice since being here.
Yeah, because the airport's in the northern part of Porto, so that's helpful.
Yeah, because like the thing is, if you want to go from Braga to Porto, you actually have to go south west. But if you want to go to the airport, it's just like almost straight across. Okay. Not quite, but
but close enough. Yeah, because you can obviously, if you just want to go down to Porto to visit, you have the train as an option. There are buses as well. But
yeah, I personally love the train to get to Porto because you have like a very scenic ride. I mean, you guys rode up here today, so I'm sure you experienced the beauty of the Portuguese countryside. But that's my favorite thing. It's like just beautiful, especially once you're a bit after Porto on the way to Braga. Love the countryside, just that view that you have there.
It is really pretty, yeah. Well, at Expats Everywhere, we believe that living abroad transforms life. So how has living abroad, because you've been doing it for a while, how has it transformed your life?
Oh, it's helped me grow as a person and figure out how far past my own boundaries that I can live within comfort, and to push those and to figure out, okay, there's my limits are a little bit further out than they were in some areas, but then other areas it's like, okay, I know I have to take it a little bit easier in some ways, but it's been wonderful to get to experience different places and different people, different cultures, and especially something I always talk about on my channel, food. I love experiencing a culture through an open vantage point of that food offers. Like, I'm not big into museums. I like the museum of life, and that very often to me is through food. The food is an expression of the culture, and the culture can be an expression of the food. So having these different experiences and to see different areas that I know some people that I grew up with will maybe never see in their lives. That's been absolutely wonderful to have these experiences that I never would have been able to have in other parts of the world other than where I was at the time. Other than the only negative to that, I would say, was the time where I lived in a area with rockets flying overhead. That's the only caveat to that. Okay. But generally speaking, no, it's really wonderful to be able to have these experiences to expand your horizons.
Awesome. Well, thanks for chatting with me today. And we'll put in the description below, we'll put your link for your channel so you guys can pop over there. But if you want to see more about Braga and you want to see what Americans are choosing, the best things to do in Braga, then check out this video right here. Now let's get moving.